sharing my umbrella with you. I just want to go home.
Seattle rain hammers a bus stop. Rowan Cade, AI CEO and single father, rushes in as 7-year-old Nora holds his shaking son, Theo. In her palm, a 3D printed fractal token, the promise Theo never lets go. "She saved me," he whispers. In a world ruled by metrics, who left a child in the storm, and will Rowan choose people over power? Seattle rain needled the glass like it had a personal grudge. Rowan Cade stood at the window of his South Lake Union loft, hoodie sleeves pushed to his forearms, watching the city smudge into watercolor. Behind him, his 6-year-old son, Theo, hummed at the kitchen island, legs swinging, a paper robot sketched in careful lines. The 3D printed fractal token, the one Theo called the promise, rested on the counter, white plastic spiraling into tiny infinities. "Helmet," Rowan said, voice gentle. "Tomorrow we bike, if the weather pretends to behave." Theo nodded solemnly, then traced the token's edges with his thumb. "You keep it safe when I sleep?" "I always do." Rowan lifted it. He had printed it the week after the funeral, when words were too blunt and grief felt like static. A symbol small enough for a child's palm, tough enough to survive a playground fall, honest enough to mean, "I come back." On the dining table, his laptop blinked awake to a calendar stacked like a Tetris column. Pre-IPO due diligence, investor rehearsal, a board dinner that promised smiles sharper than knives. The legal head, Asha Patel, had left 3 messages, all precise and calm. The CFO, Brent Kessler, had left 1, ending in a sigh that sounded like a ledger snapping shut. He should call them both, but Theo's spoon clinked against a bowl, and Rowan turned. "Bananas first, then the oatmeal," Rowan said. "Please." "Bananas are squishy," Theo announced, but obeyed. He pushed hair out of his eyes, same stubborn cowlick as his father, and the continuous glucose monitor on his arm blinked a calm green. Rowan pretended not to look. Theo pretended not to notice. In the hallway, the photo of 3 helmets hung above the shoe rack. 2 adult, 1 child. He didn't pass it without feeling the old ache. He breathed, counted to 4, counted back. The rain steadied. Asha called again. Rowan answered, put her on speaker, and lowered his voice the way he did when Theo was near. "You only call 3 times when trouble wears a tie." "Nothing dramatic," Asha said. "The bankers want another risk memo. They'll ask about founder dependence and your family logistics." He glanced at Theo, small shoulders squared over oatmeal as if it were a test. "Founder's fine. Family's getting there." "Good," Asha said. "Also, the new driver service sent an update. Tomorrow's school pickup adjusted because of the robotics club. Check the link." He heard himself say, "Will do," and filed the detail in the mental drawer reserved for things he could not afford to forget. Brent's text chimed next. Numbers, warnings, the word dilution. Then, "Are you still on track for the road show, or should we pull in the bench?" Rowan typed back, "On track," then added, "Thanks, Brent." He packed Theo's small backpack, rain jacket, notebook, favorite pencil, a snack labeled with carb counts. He held up the fractal token. "Pocket or necklace?" "Pocket," Theo decided. "Necklaces bounce." Rowan slid the token into a tiny zip pocket. "Then it rides with you. That's the rule." "Rules keep us safe," Theo recited. Simple words with room to breathe. The intercom buzzed. Groceries arrived, the delivery kid dripping water on the mat, apologizing to the floor. Rowan tipped too much and didn't explain why. After Theo's bath, they read about a robot who learned how to ask for help. Theo yawned through Chapter 2 and slept by Chapter 3. Rowan stayed, listening to the soft whistle of his son's breath, watching the green blink of the sensor. He thought of tomorrow's logistics, the driver update, the robotics club, the memo Asha needed, and the way life sometimes scattered a careful plan like leaves across a wet street. At the door, he looked back at the small shape under rocket ship sheets. I come back, he whispered, and meant it like a vow. The city kept raining. Somewhere in the quiet, a question rose he couldn't shake. For all his brilliant systems, could he keep the one promise that mattered when the storm decided to test it? The storm rolled into South Park with a fury that bent umbrellas backward and chased buses off schedule. The street lamps hummed against the sheets of rain, their glow barely cutting the blur. At the cracked shelter by the bus stop, Nora Bennett pressed her small hands around the shoulders of a boy she had never met. His skin was clammy, his words tangled into broken whispers. "You're shaking," she said, voice tiny but steady. "What's your name?" "Theo," he mumbled. His eyes fluttered, unfocused. He clutched at his stomach, then the sleeve of his jacket. Nora's heart kicked. She was only 7, but she had seen her mom study thick EMT manuals at the kitchen table. She remembered the word her mom always repeated: hypo. Something about sugar, something about fast. "Hold on, Theo." She reached into her backpack and found a crumpled granola bar. She held it out, but his hands were trembling too hard. She peeled it for him, broke a piece, pressed it into his palm. "Chew, please." He tried. He swallowed once, but his lips looked pale and his eyes darted like he might slip away. The bus whooshed past, its headlights flashing, but it didn't stop. Nora bit her lip, thinking fast. She pulled out the tiny flip phone her mother insisted she keep for emergencies, pressed speed dial 1. "Elena Bennett," came the weary but alert voice on the line. "Mom," Nora said, her voice shaking for the first time. "It's a boy, at the bus stop. He's sick, shaking. I think it's that sugar thing you said. Please, hurry." There was no pause. Her mother's tone sharpened into command. "Stay with him. I'm on my way. Can you keep him awake?" "Yes." Nora crouched low, holding Theo's hand. Rainwater ran down her cheeks, but she whispered, "You're not alone. My mom's coming. Just breathe. Just stay with me." Theo groaned. His head tipped toward her shoulder, small and heavy. She kept talking. Anything to fill the silence. "I like robots. Do you? I build them with soda cans sometimes. You could teach me, maybe. Just don't fall asleep, okay?" Minutes stretched. Then headlights slowed, and a dented old sedan screeched against the curb. Elena leapt out, her EMT trainee kit clutched in one hand, her hair damp from the rain. She knelt instantly, eyes sharp, movements precise. "Good job, Nora," she said quickly. "You did right." She checked Theo's glucose monitor, pulling his arm gently to read the blinking numbers. "Severe hypoglycemia," she muttered, already opening her bag. She snapped open a glucose gel packet, kneeling eye level with the boy. "Theo, sweetheart, I'm Elena. Can you hear me? You're going to be okay." She coaxed the gel between his lips, rubbed his back as he tried to swallow. Slowly, his eyes steadied, the frantic dart softening into focus. He looked from Elena to Nora, as if realizing the world had not abandoned him after all. Elena exhaled, one hand still against his back. Colors coming back, he's stabilizing. She met Nora's eyes, pride mixed with worry. "You may have saved his life." Nora only tightened her grip on his hand. "I told him he wasn't alone." The rain hammered the bus stop roof. A siren wailed far off, swallowed by the storm. Theo blinked, murmured, "Fractal." His hand fumbled at his pocket, but it was empty. Nora looked down and saw a strange white token lying near the puddle. Tiny, spiraled like a shell from the future. She picked it up carefully, not knowing it was more than plastic. Then, through the haze of rain, sleek electric SUVs rounded the corner, headlights cutting through the dark. Doors opened in sync, and a tall man leapt out, soaked through, his hoodie plastered to his frame. He saw Theo in Elena's arms and fell to his knees on the wet pavement. "Dad," Theo whispered, voice thin but alive. Nora clutched the fractal token tight in her fist, not knowing her small hand now held the hinge of fate. The SUVs idled at the curb, their headlights casting harsh beams across the rain-slick street. The tall man tore off his hood, chest heaving as he dropped beside the boy. His hazel eyes locked onto Theo, and for a moment he was no longer the CEO with endless calendars and billion-dollar calls. He was only a father, terrified and trembling. "Theo," he breathed, cupping the boy's damp face. "I'm here. I'm here." Theo's lips moved, and though his voice was weak, the words struck clear. "She saved me." He pointed faintly toward Nora, who still crouched close, her small fingers curled around the strange white token she had found. Rowan Cade followed his son's gesture. His gaze landed on the little girl with wide, steady eyes and wet strands of hair sticking to her cheeks. She held out the token without speaking, its fractal design glowing faintly under the streetlight. Rowan froze. That object wasn't just plastic. It was the symbol his son never let go of. The promise Rowan had made the night his wife was buried, a vow carved in spirals of polymer and grief. To see it in the hand of this stranger felt like a door opening where there had only been walls. "How?" His voice cracked, and then he shook his head. It didn't matter. He pressed the token back into Theo's small hand, then lifted his son against his chest. Elena straightened, rain dripping from her jacket, her EMT kit still open on the ground. His glucose dropped dangerously low. "He's stable for now, but you need to keep monitoring him. That sensor is accurate if you check it." Rowan's eyes flicked to her, sharp at first, assessing. But what he saw wasn't accusation or agenda, only clear competence and the tired determination of a woman who had acted without hesitation. "You helped him?" Elena shook her head slightly. "My daughter called me. She didn't freeze. She stayed." She gave Nora a glance that held quiet pride. Theo stirred, whispering again. Rowan bent low to catch it. "She was the only one here." Rowan swallowed hard, rain streaking his face like it belonged there. He turned back to Nora. "Thank you," he said simply. The words weren't polished or practiced, just raw. Nora shrugged, small shoulders trembling. "I only did what I could." For a man who measured success in algorithms, quarterly gains, and innovation curves, Rowan felt something disorienting. The weight of kindness that couldn't be graphed. He looked down at Theo, then back at the girl who had been a stranger 5 minutes ago. The security detail moved closer, murmuring about schedules, privacy. The board dinner Rowan had already missed. He waved them back. Tonight wasn't about them. He glanced at Elena again. "You're training to be an EMT?" She nodded, brushing wet hair from her face. "Night shifts, coursework, whatever pays the rent. This isn't my first scare." Rowan studied her a beat longer, then looked back at Theo's pale face resting against his shoulder. The storm roared, but inside him something quieter began to shift. For once, he didn't have a reply that could fit in a press release or a shareholder deck. Nora broke the silence, her voice small but sure. "He dropped this." She pointed at the token, still clutched now between Theo's fingers. "He said it was a promise." Rowan's throat tightened. He remembered printing that fractal piece in a sleepless haze, promising his boy that as long as he had it, his father would always come back. And now, on this storm-soaked night, another child had been the one to honor it. He whispered to Theo, but everyone could hear it in the hush that followed. "Your promise was kept." Theo exhaled softly, calmer, and Rowan held him closer. The Empire could wait. The IPO could wait. In this moment, all that mattered was a little boy alive in his arms, a girl who refused to let go, and the strange certainty that this night had rewritten the path of his life. Rain drummed against the pavement, steady as a heartbeat. Rowan crouched in the storm, clutching Theo, while Nora and Elena stood nearby, dripping wet but calm. For a man used to metrics and numbers, it felt like the world had shifted under his feet. Theo stirred again, his voice fragile but clear enough to cut through the rain. "She saved me, Dad." Rowan looked into his son's hazel-brown eyes, then back at Nora, her small frame trembling, yet her gaze unwavering. He felt his chest tighten. He'd heard those words in boardrooms, in labs. in the cold glow of investors thanking him for returns. But never like this. He turned to Elena, his voice hoarse. "I don't know how to say thank you." Elena shook her head, pulling her jacket tighter against the downpour. "Don't thank me. I only did what any adult should do. Nora's the one who noticed, the one who stayed when it was easier to walk away." Rowan's throat closed. He glanced at Nora again, her hair plastered to her forehead, her shoes soaked through. "You stayed," he repeated softly, as though testing the weight of the words. "Yes," Nora said simply, lifting her chin. "He was scared. I told him he wasn't alone." For a moment, Rowan could hardly breathe. His empire was built on prediction models, algorithms, simulations of human behavior. Yet, no code in existence could explain why this girl had stopped, why she had chosen compassion over convenience. Theo's hand fumbled weakly, searching until Rowan guided it toward the fractal token. Theo clutched it close, as though anchoring himself. Rowan brushed damp hair from his boy's face and whispered, "Promise kept." The SUVs idled, their drivers restless. One stepped forward, murmuring, "Mr. Cade, the board's waiting." Rowan snapped his gaze toward him. "Not tonight." The tone silenced them more effectively than any corporate decree. He stood slowly, Theo secure in his arms. His son's head rested against his shoulder, fragile but alive. He looked at Elena and Nora, the storm wrapping them together like threads of the same moment. "Let me drive you home," he said. It wasn't a question. "You shouldn't be out here in this weather." Elena hesitated, glancing at Nora, then at the luxury SUVs gleaming under the rain. Her instinct was to refuse. Men like this lived in worlds that chewed people like her up. Still, she saw Theo's pale face pressed to Rowan's chest and softened. "All right. Just this once." Inside the SUV, the hum of electric motors replaced the roar of the storm. Theo slept against Rowan's side. Nora sat across, the fractal token now in her lap, turning it curiously. Rowan watched her, then asked, "Why did you pick it up?" Nora looked up, rain still glistening on her cheeks. It looked important. Things like this don't belong in puddles. Rowan nodded slowly. She couldn't have known the truth, yet she was right. It wasn't just a trinket. It was the one promise that tethered him to his son. And now, in Nora's small hands, it seemed to carry more weight than ever. Elena studied him cautiously, arms folded. "You're his father. But where were you tonight?" The words struck, not with malice, but with honesty. Rowan exhaled, glancing down at Theo's sleeping face. A board meeting that didn't matter, not compared to this. For once, he didn't feel the need to defend himself. The truth was sharp enough. The SUV pulled up in front of the Bennett's small apartment complex, its paint peeling, the entry light buzzing weakly. Rowan stepped out with Theo still in his arms, the rain easing to a drizzle. He turned to Elena, his voice quiet but steady. "I owe you more than thanks." She shook her head again. "You don't owe us anything. Just be there for him. That's enough." Rowan studied her, then Nora, who still held the fractal token tight. He felt something shift inside him, an empire's worth of data, power, and plans suddenly weighed against a single night's kindness, and for the first time he wasn't sure which was stronger. The drizzle had settled into a fine mist by the time Rowan carried Theo up to his loft in South Lake Union, but the storm inside him was only just beginning. He laid his son gently on the couch, tucking a blanket over his small frame. Theo's chest rose and fell in steady rhythm now, but the faint memory of his trembling still clawed at Rowan's gut. Asha Patel was waiting near the kitchen island, tablet in hand, blazer immaculate despite the late hour. She had come straight from the office, her expression calm but edged. "You missed the board dinner," she said without accusation, simply a fact. Rowan ran a hand over his damp hair, pulled off his hoodie. "Theo collapsed," he said. "That was the only meeting that mattered." Asha's gaze softened when she saw the boy under the blanket. She set her tablet down. "What happened?" "Hypoglycemia, out in the rain." Rowan's jaw tightened. A little girl found him, 7 years old. She called her mother, an EMT trainee. They stabilized him before I got there. And where was the driver? Asha asked sharply. That's what I want to know. Rowan's tone cut through the loft's quiet hum. I had updated logistics, robotics club, adjusted pickup. I double-checked the message. Yet my son ended up alone at a bus stop in a storm. Asha pressed her lips together. I'll start digging first thing. GPS logs, driver reports, everything. If there was negligence, we'll find it. Rowan nodded, but his thoughts tangled. Behind every question of logistics was a deeper fear. Had he trusted his empire's systems more than his own instincts as a father? As if to sharpen that fear, his phone buzzed with Brent Kessler's name. Rowan let it ring twice before answering. Rowan. Brent's voice came brisk, too smooth, too measured. We had investors waiting for you tonight. They're already whispering. Miss one dinner, and suddenly people wonder if you're capable of leading a $10 billion company through an IPO. Rowan's knuckles whitened on the phone. My son nearly died tonight. That's why I wasn't there. Silence. Then Brent exhaled. And who was watching him? Rowan bristled. That's irrelevant. No, Brent said, his tone tightening. It's very relevant. Shareholders don't like surprises. They'll say you're distracted, vulnerable. If there's a custody question, if rumors spread about entanglements, Rowan cut him off. Enough. We'll talk tomorrow. He hung up, chest heaving. Asha stepped closer. He's circling, smelling weakness before the IPO. I know, Rowan muttered. His eyes fell on Theo, then the white fractal token on the coffee table. He picked it up, turning the spirals in his hand. But weakness isn't letting people in. It's forgetting what matters. Asha tilted her head. You sound like someone who just realized the world isn't run on algorithms alone. Rowan gave a short, humorless laugh. Maybe I did. She didn't press further. Instead, she opened her tablet. I'll get to work. But Rowan, prepare yourself. Brent will try to spin this. A single father, absent at the wrong moment, relying on strangers. He'll make it look like negligence. Rowan's jaw clenched. Strangers saved my son's life. That's not negligence. That's grace. The token lay cold and solid in his palm, an object meant to reassure a child. Now a reminder to himself. He had built sentience labs on the belief that intelligence could be modeled, predicted, perfected. Tonight proved him wrong. He sat beside Theo, brushing hair from his son's forehead. The boy stirred, but didn't wake. Rowan whispered, I won't let them use this against us. I won't let them erase what happened tonight. Outside, the city lights blurred in the drizzle, Seattle humming with the quiet of midnight industry. Inside, Rowan Cade, CEO, innovator, father, made a vow as sharp as any contract. He would uncover why Theo had been left alone, even if it meant tearing apart the very systems he had built. Morning bled gray through the tall windows of Rowan's loft, rain streaking the glass in lazy trails. Theo still slept on the couch, curled under a blanket, the faint glow of his glucose monitor pulsing steady green. Rowan stood at the kitchen counter, fingers drumming against a mug of untouched coffee. His eyes, shadowed from a sleepless night, were fixed on the fractal token resting beside the mug. Asha arrived before sunrise, as she always did when stakes climbed high. She set her bag down with deliberate calm. I've pulled the logs, she said. The driver never showed at the robotics club. Dispatch marked it as complete anyway. Someone tampered with the system entries. Rowan's gaze snapped to hers. Tampered. Yes, and it's not random. The timing, the way the record was falsified, it looks like an intentional vulnerability. If I had to guess, I'd say Brent's people wanted leverage. Rowan exhaled, sharp and furious. He left my son exposed. Asha didn't flinch. That's the implication. But let's keep it precise. We'll build the proof before we confront him. She held up a folder of printed reports. Meanwhile, I've confirmed everything else. 911 logs show Nora's call came at 8:13 p.m. Elena Bennett's testimony matches. Paramedic dispatch records confirm she stabilized Theo before you arrived. Rowan took the folder, flipping through. Each page felt heavier than the last. Objective proof of the night's storm, of strangers stepping into a role he should have been there to fill. He closed it, leaning on the counter. Do you ever wonder, Asha, if I built something so vast I forgot the one thing I swore never to neglect? Her tone softened. Rowan, you're not a machine. You can't calculate grief, or fatherhood, or luck. She gestured toward Theo, still sleeping. But you can decide what story to tell about last night. Rowan's throat tightened. The story is simple. My son nearly died because my world is broken, and a girl I'd never met reminded me what it means to stay. Asha nodded once. Then that's the story we'll defend. But be ready. Brent's already whispering. He's suggesting to the board that you're compromised, that your son is a distraction, that Elena Bennett is more than just a bystander. Rowan slammed his palm against the counter, startling even himself. He'll paint her as some opportunist, won't he? Use her kindness as ammunition. Yes, Asha said quietly, unless we stay ahead of him. The sound of small footsteps cut through their tension. Theo shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. The fractal token was clutched in his fist, his hair a soft mess. Dad, he murmured. Is it morning? Rowan knelt instantly, pulling him close. Yeah, buddy, it's morning. He studied his son's face, the faint pallor still there, and whispered, You scared me last night. Theo leaned against him, sleepy but steady. Nora didn't. She said I wasn't alone. Rowan felt his chest ache. He glanced at Asha, then back at Theo. She was right. You weren't alone. Theo looked down at the token. Can I give it to her? She kept it safe when I dropped it. Rowan froze. That tiny object had been the anchor between father and son for years. Yet hearing Theo offer it freely, his first act of trust in someone else since his mother's death, hit him harder than any boardroom blow. You can, Rowan said softly, brushing his son's hair. If that's what you want. Theo nodded, then yawned, curling back onto the couch. Rowan stood slowly, turning back to Asha. Get everything ready, he said. We'll face the board, the investors, Brent, but not on their terms. This time, the truth starts with what saved my son, not what almost destroyed him. Outside, the skyline of Seattle glimmered under the thinning rain. Inside, Rowan Cade set his jaw with the clarity of a man who knew storms would come again, but also knew he wouldn't face them alone. By evening, the city had shaken off its morning haze. Rowan stood in his office on the 36th floor of Sentience Labs, gazing out over Seattle's skyline. The glass walls reflected back a man who looked calm to the world but carried a storm inside. Theo's words lingered in his mind. Nora said I wasn't alone. That kind of faith was fragile. Could his empire, his IPO, his power crush the very lives that had saved his son? Asha sat across from him at the conference table, her laptop glowing faint blue. I've drafted a preliminary report. It shows the falsified pickup log. It's enough to push back if Brent goes public. Rowan didn't answer right away. His eyes drifted to the fractal token in his palm. He had brought it with him, though he told himself it was for Theo. But truthfully, he needed it too. A spiral of promise, a reminder he wasn't invincible. Asha studied him. You're thinking about Elena and Nora. Rowan sighed. They belong to a universe that eats people like us alive. I step into their lives, even to thank them, and tomorrow they're gossip headlines. Today I call her a hero. Tomorrow they'll call her a liability. Do you believe that? Asha asked gently. Rowan tightened his grip on the token. I've watched it happen too many times. Good people reduced to sound bites. The office door opened. Brent Kessler walked in without knocking, his suit immaculate, his smile cutting. Rowan, he said smoothly, I hear your son had a rough night. Nothing serious, I hope. Rowan's jaw tensed. He's recovering. Brent set down a folder, sliding it across the table like a blade. The board is nervous. Word is out that you've been distracted. Investors don't like distractions, especially ones that come with tabloid appeal. A single mother, a chance encounter. You can imagine the stories they're already spinning. Rowan didn't touch the folder. You'll weaponize anything, won't you? Brent's smile never wavered. Not weaponize. Protect. Someone has to safeguard the IPO. He leaned closer, voice dropping. You think compassion wins markets? It doesn't. Precision does. Control does. If you want to keep your empire, you need to cut ties with anyone who makes you look vulnerable. The silence after his words was heavy. Rowan set the fractal token on the glass table between them, its spiral catching the overhead light. This saved my son last night, he said evenly. Not my algorithms, not your investors, a child's compassion, and a stranger's courage. Brent's smirk faltered. That's not the narrative shareholders want. Then maybe shareholders need a better story. Rowan shot back. His voice rose, steel cutting through. I won't erase the people who stood in the rain for my boy, just so you can polish a prospectus. Asha broke the tension, her tone cool. Careful, Brent. We already have evidence of tampered logs. If we follow the trail and it leads back to your office, the only distraction the board will see is you. Brent's eyes flickered just for a second before his smile snapped back. Threats won't hold when money's on the line. He gathered his folder, buttoned his jacket. We'll see which story survives. He left, the door clicking shut. Rowan sat back heavily, running both hands through his damp hair. Asha closed her laptop with a quiet snap. You realize he won't stop. He'll come after you, and Elena, and Nora. Rowan looked again at the fractal token, its design infinite yet fragile. I know, he said. His voice was low but steady. But I also know what matters. I won't let their kindness be drowned in his noise. He pocketed the token, as if carrying both a burden and a vow. The skyline outside glowed with the promise of night, but inside Rowan wrestled with a question he could no longer avoid. Could he protect his son and the two strangers who saved him, or would his world devour them whole? Rain returned by the weekend, softer this time, a mist that clung to the glass awnings over Pioneer Square. Rowan guided Theo up the steps of a modest brick building, the boy's small hand tucked into his. Nora skipped just ahead, her backpack bouncing, clutching the fractal token like a talisman she wasn't ready to give back. Elena followed behind, cautious, arms folded as if she could ward off the weight of the moment. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paint and new carpet. Empty desks lined the walls, power cords coiled like vines waiting for life. A sign taped to the door read, Future Home of the Sentience Community Tech Hub. Rowan stopped in the middle of the bare room. He knelt to Theo's level, then to Nora's, eyes searching theirs with a rare softness. This space, he said, isn't about IPOs or investors. It's about kids like you, Nora, about people like your mom, people who see someone hurting and don't walk away. Nora's eyes widened. You mean, this is for us? Rowan nodded. For you, and for every kid who deserves a chance to build, to learn, to dream without fear. Elena frowned slightly, still on edge. Why are you doing this? Don't tell me it's charity. I've seen enough men in suits who give scraps so they can polish their image. Rowan met her stare without flinching. Not charity. Investment. You proved strength when the world expected nothing from you. I'd be a fool not to build on that. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, heavy with doubt and something unspoken. Then Theo tugged his father's sleeve. Dad, can Nora come here, like to learn robots? Rowan smiled faintly, brushing his son's hair. That's the idea. Nora clutched the token tighter, her voice small but glowing. A scholarship? Really? Yes, Rowan said firmly. Full support. You've already proven you deserve it. Nora squealed softly, spinning once on her heel before hiding her grin behind both hands. Theo laughed for the first time since the storm, the sound filling the empty room like sunlight breaking through, but Elena's arms remained crossed. "And me?" she asked quietly. Rowan straightened. "I'd like you to run this place. Director of Community Programs. Build it your way. Training, mentorship, first aid if you want it. Whatever you know the neighborhood needs." Her eyes narrowed. "You don't even know me. Why would you hand me something like this?" "Because you were there," Rowan said simply, "when no one else was. Because you didn't ask who Theo's father was before you acted. You didn't measure the risk. You just helped. That's the kind of leadership this hub needs." Elena looked away, blinking hard. "You're from a universe that eats people like us alive," she whispered. "Today, you thank us. Tomorrow, we're a headline. I can't put my daughter through that." Rowan's voice softened, stripped of all CEO polish. "I can't promise the world won't be cruel, but I can promise you won't face it alone." Nora stepped closer, slipping her hand into her mother's. "Mom, he means it. Look." She opened her fist, showing the fractal token. "He gave this to Theo, but Theo wanted me to keep it safe. Doesn't that mean something?" Elena's breath caught. The plastic spiral gleamed under the fluorescent lights, small but unbreakable. She closed her eyes, torn between fear and the fragile hope her daughter's face carried. Rowan waited, hands at his sides, no pressure in his stance. Only quiet certainty. Elena finally exhaled. "I'll think about it." For Rowan, it was enough. He smiled faintly, one corner of his mouth lifting. "That's all I ask." As they left the empty hub, rain still pattering outside, Nora skipped ahead with Theo, her laughter ringing bright against the gray. Elena lingered behind, the token spiral imprinted in her mind, and Rowan knew the decision ahead would shape all their lives. The first week of Nora's new school started with excitement, then soured into whispers. By Wednesday, kids huddled in the cafeteria corners, sneering, "charity case," when she passed. She kept her chin high, clutching her lunchbox, but the words hit harder than sticks. Theo noticed. He slid onto the bench beside her, his voice low. "Ignore them. They don't know you saved me." But Nora's smile wavered. "What if they're right? What if people only think I'm here because of your dad's money?" Before Theo could answer, a phone buzzed. A group of students gathered, giggling over a new video spreading through feeds. The screen showed Rowan and Elena in a grainy embrace outside the Tech Hub construction site, except it wasn't real. The pixels bled if you looked too close, the movements off by half a second. A deep fake. By evening, the damage was done. Local blogs ran headlines about Seattle's billionaire CEO's secret romance. Worse, an anonymous complaint landed on CPS desks questioning whether Theo was safe at home. Elena's phone rang twice with unknown numbers before she switched it off. At the loft, Rowan stood at the kitchen counter, tablet glowing with headlines. His jaw clenched, his hand white around the fractal token. Elena sat at the table, her shoulders tight. Nora perched beside Theo, trying to distract him with a robot kit, but her own hands shook too much to screw the pieces in straight. "This is what I was afraid of," Elena said finally, her voice strained. "We're pawns in someone else's game. My daughter's being mocked. I'm being painted as—" She trailed off, fury flashing in her eyes. "And CPS, what if they take Theo from you?" Rowan forced a breath, setting the tablet down. "That won't happen. We'll fight this." Elena's gaze burned. "You're from a universe where people fight with lawyers and money. I'm just a woman trying to finish her EMT training. I can't—" Rowan cut in, his voice breaking with urgency. "Don't pull away now. Not when you're the reason my son is alive. Not when Nora is the reason he smiled again." Nora looked up, wide-eyed, holding a tiny, half-assembled robot in her palm. "Mr. Cade?" she whispered. "Are we in trouble because we helped?" Rowan's chest ached. He walked around the counter, crouching eye level with her and Theo. His hoodie was damp from the rain he'd biked through earlier, his hazel eyes fierce but softening when he saw their faces. "Listen to me," he said quietly, steady as a vow. "Those who run into the rain to save others are never left behind. Do you understand? Not by me. Not ever." Theo reached over, linking his small fingers with Nora's. "See? We're the same. We stayed." Nora's lip trembled, but she nodded, clutching his hand tight. Elena exhaled, her resolve cracking just enough to let his words sink in. For the first time since the storm, she let her eyes meet Rowan's fully. "Then you'd better prove it," she whispered. Rain pattered against the windows again, as though the city itself was listening. Rowan knew Brent had orchestrated this storm of lies, but looking at Nora and Theo, hands clasped like anchors, he also knew. Storms only proved who was willing to stand in the downpour. Night had settled heavy over the loft, the kind that made Seattle's skyline glow like glass lanterns in the dark. Inside, warmth hummed low from the kitchen, where Nora and Theo sprawled across the rug with a robot kit scattered around them. Bolts, sensors, and tiny wheels littered the carpet like confetti. "Not like that," Nora giggled, nudging Theo's hand. "See? The wire goes here, not in the speaker hole." Theo frowned in concentration, his tongue poking out slightly as he fixed the wire. "Like this?" Nora clapped softly. "Perfect. Now it'll move forward instead of spinning in circles." Their laughter filled the room, small and bright. For the first time in days, it sounded like home again. Rowan leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching them with a softness he rarely allowed himself. His hoodie was rumpled, his hair still damp from the rain, but his gaze was steady. From the kitchen table, Marta Cade watched too, though her expression carried more suspicion than warmth. Rowan's mother had flown in after hearing whispers of CPS inquiries. She was a woman with posture as sharp as her words, her silver hair pulled into a bun that spoke of decades of discipline. "I see they're happy," she said quietly, her voice edged. Rowan turned. "They're kids. They deserve happy." Marta folded her hands, her tone cool. "And this girl, Nora. She's attached herself quickly. Children don't understand lines, Rowan. But we must." Rowan's jaw tensed. "She didn't attach herself. She saved Theo. That bond isn't one I'm about to sever because it doesn't fit an investor's clean narrative." Marta's gaze softened just slightly. "And Elena?" Rowan hesitated. "She's steady. She has more integrity than half my board combined." Marta studied her son, then shifted her eyes back to the rug. "Theo," she called gently. "Come here, darling." Theo scrambled up, token still clutched in his hand. He leaned against his grandmother, his small frame fitting easily into her side. Nora lingered where she was, fiddling with a gear, unsure if she was invited closer. Marta looked down at Theo's wrist where the glucose sensor blinked steady. "Have you checked it before eating your snack?" she asked, tone kind but firm. Theo paused, eyes wide. "Not yet." Before Rowan could speak, Nora piped up. "We did. I showed him how to scan it. See?" She grabbed the reader from the table, held it up confidently, and demonstrated the scan. "It said 97. That's safe for crackers, right?" Marta blinked, surprised. She looked from the device to Nora, then back at Theo. "You knew to ask her?" Theo nodded, grinning. "She reminds me when I forget." For the first time that night, Marta's stern expression cracked. She brushed Theo's hair gently. "Smart girl." Nora beamed, her small shoulders straightening at the praise. She placed the reader back carefully, as though it were treasure. "He calls it a robot, so I help the robot too." Rowan exhaled quietly, something loosening in his chest. He caught his mother's eye, and for once she didn't challenge him. Later, when the kids were tucked into bed, Nora whispering stories about future robots and Theo laughing until sleep tugged at him, Marta joined Rowan on the balcony. The city lights flickered through the drizzle, painting them both in gold and gray. "She calls me Grandma Marta," she said, almost to herself. Rowan smiled faintly. And you didn't correct her. Marta's eyes shone with something softer now. I didn't want to. She paused, then added quietly, Perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps family is not always blood, but the ones who stay when the rain falls hardest. Rowan looked back through the window at the children asleep in the tangled blankets. For once, the loft didn't feel hollow. It felt alive. By Monday, the headlines had spread faster than the storm clouds ever did. Blogs, business outlets, even talk radio circled the same phrases. CEO's affair, single mother and sympathy pawn. Each story cut like a knife, not because they were true, but because they chipped at the fragile trust Rowan was trying to build. Asha stormed into his office at Sentience Labs, a folder in her hand. Brent's fingerprints are all over this, she said flatly. He's feeding the media. He's trying to corner you before the IPO vote. Rowan sat behind his desk, the fractal token resting between his hands. And CPS? They're sniffing around, Asha admitted. An anonymous tip claimed Theo was being neglected, that you were more focused on, she hesitated, your relationship with Elena. Rowan's jaw tightened. Relationship. They've twisted kindness into scandal. Asha's voice softened. That's the game Brent plays. He knows you won't strike back with the same cruelty. He's banking on it. Meanwhile, Elena felt the weight of small-town whispers in every corner of their neighborhood. At the grocery store, eyes lingered too long. At EMT class, hushed voices made her stomach knot. She held her head high, but at home she avoided Rowan's gaze, afraid of becoming the liability Brent painted her as. That evening, she sat at the Bennett's kitchen table, textbooks spread out but untouched. Nora sat across from her, glumly twisting the fractal token between her fingers. Mom, Nora said softly, are we in trouble because we helped Theo? Elena's throat tightened. She reached across, covering her daughter's hand. You did the right thing, baby. Don't ever doubt that. But everyone's mean at school, Nora whispered. They say I'm here because of Mr. Cade's money, that I don't belong. Before Elena could answer, a knock rattled the thin apartment door. She opened it to find Rowan, rain dripping from his hoodie, eyes sharp but weary. In his arms, Theo held a robot kit, his smile tentative. We came for backup, Rowan said quietly. Inside, the children gravitated toward each other instantly, crouching on the floor to tinker with gears. Rowan remained at the doorway, hesitant. Elena crossed her arms. You shouldn't be here. You'll only give Brent more fuel. Rowan shook his head. Let him. I'm not abandoning the people who ran into the storm for my son. Elena's eyes searched his face, as though trying to test every word. That's noble, Rowan, but nobility doesn't stop CPS or smear campaigns. He crouched to Theo's level, brushing damp hair from his son's forehead, then looked up at Nora. You told Theo he wasn't alone, Teet. That matters more than any headline. His gaze rose to Elena, steady, unflinching. And I meant what I said. Those who run into the rain to save others are never left behind. Not by me. Not ever. The room fell quiet, the children's laughter filling the silence with fragile hope. Elena felt her walls crack just slightly. She saw not the CEO splashed across headlines, but a father desperate to protect his son and the two strangers who had become something more. Still, outside their small apartment, the storm of lies gathered strength, and Brent Kessler was already steering it straight toward them. The press conference room at Sentience Labs buzzed with cameras and murmurs, the air thick with speculation. Every outlet in Seattle had shown up, drawn by the scandal, some waiting to watch Rowan stumble, others to witness a fall from grace. Brent sat smugly in the back row, his smile faint but triumphant, convinced his narrative had already won. Rowan walked to the podium slowly, not in the crisp suit the media expected, but in his gray hoodie and dark jeans, the same clothes he wore when he coded through the night. He set the fractal token on the podium, letting the cameras catch its spiral. His hazel eyes swept the room, Not sharp, but steady. "Last week," he began, voice low but clear, "my son nearly died in the rain." A ripple ran through the crowd. He was alone, his glucose crashing, and I wasn't there. But a child named Nora and her mother, Elena, were. They saved his life, not with algorithms, not with IPO forecasts, but with courage and kindness. He paused, letting the words hang. The room stilled, every pen frozen above notepads. "But you've been shown a different story, haven't you?" Rowan continued, his tone sharpening. "A story where compassion is twisted into scandal, where a mother is painted as an opportunist, where a child is mocked as a pawn. That story is a lie." Asha stepped forward then, laptop in hand. The big screen behind Rowan flickered to life. She moved with precision, her voice crisp. "We've traced the doctored video-making rounds. Frame by frame, pixel by pixel, we identified the markers of a deepfake pipeline, and we followed that trail." On screen, the chain of data unfolded. Metadata, file paths, server timestamps, until one name appeared at the end. BK Consulting, an alias Brent had used before. Gasps rippled through the audience. Brent's smile faltered. "And that's not all," Rowan said, his voice cutting now. "Here are the tampered logs from my son's school pickup. Someone deliberately altered records, leaving my 6-year-old vulnerable in a storm. We traced those alterations to the same network. This wasn't negligence, it was sabotage." The room erupted, flashes strobing like lightning. Brent shifted in his chair, his composure cracking under the weight of evidence. Rowan steadied himself, eyes returning to the cameras. "My company builds intelligence systems, but last week reminded me of something no machine can calculate, the value of humanity. That night, Nora gave my son a fractal token he thought he'd lost. She told him he wasn't alone, and she was right." He looked down at the token on the podium, his voice softening. "This is no longer just a promise between me and my boy. It's a promise to every child who faces what he did. That's why today, Sentience Labs is launching the Open Insulin Kids Fund. Every underprivileged family will have access to glucose monitors and insulin support, free of charge. No child should face the storm alone." For a long moment, silence stretched across the room. Then applause began. Not polite, but full, rolling forward like thunder. Cameras zoomed in on Rowan's face, on the token glinting under the lights, on a CEO who had just turned a scandal into something larger than profit. In the back, Brent rose quietly and slipped out, his empire of whispers collapsing behind him. Rowan stepped away from the podium, the weight of the storm lifting. For once, the story wasn't about his algorithms. It was about the smallest kindness, the kind that had saved his son. The tech hub opening drew a crowd that spilled into the rainy Seattle street. Neighbors, students, families, reporters who had once hunted scandal but now came chasing hope. The air inside buzzed with the hum of new computers and the laughter of children peering into 3D printers. Banners read, "Sentience Community Tech Hub, built for the future, rooted in humanity." Rowan stood at the center, not on a stage but kneeling eye level with Nora. In his hand he held the fractal token, polished now, but the same small spiral that had lived in Theo's pocket. He pressed it into her palm with deliberate care. "This," he said softly, though microphones carried his words to the crowd, "isn't just a piece of plastic. It's a promise. You saved my son, and now I promise you'll never fight alone again." Nora's eyes shone. She closed her fingers around the token, squeezing as if it were life itself. "You ran into the rain for Theo. I ran into the rain too. That makes us the same." A murmur swept through the room, not pity, not scandal, something like reverence. Theo grinned beside her, his hand finding hers. "Team Rain," he whispered, and she giggled through tears. From the back, Marta watched, her hands clasped tight against her chest. She had once feared this girl would complicate their lives. Now she saw how Nora had woven herself into their family's heartbeat. Elena stepped forward, eyes full, voice trembling just enough to betray the weight she carried. "You could have turned us into a headline. You could have walked away after your son was safe, but you didn't. You chose us." Rowan looked at her, steady and unguarded. "No, you chose us. That night you ran when no one else did. All I did was follow." The applause that rose then wasn't for a billionaire or a product launch. It was for a boy alive, a girl unafraid, and a mother who had stood in the storm without asking who she was saving. Children crowded the new lab stations, their laughter echoing. A 3D printer began to hum, layering the first lines of another fractal token, symbols of resilience meant to be passed hand to hand, generation to generation. Rowan turned to Nora again. "This hub, these scholarships, this fund, it all started with you holding my son's hand in the rain. Never forget that, Nora. Empires may be built with algorithms, but lives are built by moments like that one." Nora nodded solemnly, clutching the token to her chest. "I won't forget." The cameras flashed, capturing the sight of a child holding a promise, a CEO kneeling before her, and a community beginning to believe that kindness could reshape an empire. Outside, the rain slowed to a mist, as if the storm itself had finally given way. Weeks later, the rain in Seattle felt softer, more forgiving. Rowan cycled through South Lake Union with Theo strapped safely in his little bike seat and Nora pedaling proudly beside them on a smaller bike, her backpack stuffed with robot sketches. Elena walked a few paces behind, smiling despite herself, a clipboard tucked under her arm from another day running the tech hub. Life hadn't quieted. Headlines still swirled. Brent's shadow still lingered in courtrooms, but inside their circle, something new had taken root. Not wealth, not status. Something stronger. One Saturday morning, the four of them crowded into the hub's workshop. Kids from the neighborhood gathered around tables, building small machines, learning code. Nora guided Theo's hands over a tiny sensor kit, her voice patient. "Check the number, then snack. That's how we win." Theo laughed, repeating her words like a chant. "Check, then snack." Marta sat nearby, knitting with quiet eyes on the children. When Nora bounded over to show her a finished model, Marta reached out and pulled her close without hesitation. "You did well, dear heart," she whispered. Nora beamed, hugging her like family. Rowan stood at the doorway, hoodie sleeves pushed to his elbows, glasses slipping down his nose. He watched the scene with the strange ache of gratitude, an ache he hadn't felt since his wife's passing. The token sat in a display case on the hub's wall now, but its meaning had spread far beyond plastic spirals. That evening, as the last kids left and the hum of machines wound down, Rowan walked Elena outside. The mist hung low, but the streetlights painted it gold. He hesitated, then said, "Do you ever think about how one storm changed everything?" Elena's eyes softened. "I think about it every day." She looked toward Nora, who skipped ahead with Theo. "And I think about how fragile it all is, but maybe that's what makes it worth holding." Rowan exhaled, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in weeks. "I built an empire on intelligence, but it took your daughter's kindness to remind me what resilience really looks like." Elena smiled faintly, shaking her head. "Funny, isn't it? You thought you were saving us, but maybe we saved you too." Rowan didn't argue. He only looked ahead where Nora and Theo ran into the drizzle, their laughter echoing against brick and glass. In that moment, it didn't matter that he was a visionary CEO, or that IPOs loomed, or that power shifted daily in boardrooms. What mattered was this: a chosen family, born in a storm, bound by a promise small enough to fit in a child's hand, strong enough to reshape an empire. The rain kept falling, but this time it felt like blessing.